We just got done talking to Takaya Imamura, who worked at Nintendo for over 30 years on games like Star Fox, F-Zero, plenty of other games in both those series, and even outside those as well. We got to chat with him because he is working on a new game called Omega 6, The Triangle Stars, which we'll talk more about in a moment. Tom, how are you feeling about everything that we just got to talk to him about?
Oh, I'm just over the Majora's Mask moon. It's such a unique opportunity to talk to a developer who, of course, influenced Majora's Mask so much, and so many other games I love, like F-Zero and whatnot. I mean, it's amazing looking back on his track record.
Track record, like the Traxxas Sunrise FX, which he worked on.
You're right, do that.
Perfect. No, it was a ton of fun. Like, I've been a longtime fan of his, since a kid. So it was amazing to be able to sit down and talk with him. We covered all kinds of topics, including, of course, his upcoming game being Omega 6: The Triangle Stars. We also touched on, what happened to F-Zero during his tenure at Nintendo. We touch on, as well, some mysteries surrounding Majora's Mask and what exactly he helped create in that game, which I believe a lot of people have been wondering about. Tom, anything else stood out to you before we get to the actual interview?
Yeah, just asking him what he'd like to work on for a non-Nintendo property, and also it's kind of a surprising answer, and what happened to those games he worked on that after 2016 when it was his last released Nintendo game.
What happened to them indeed? Well, stay tuned to find out, along with tons of other things, as we get to our interview with him right now. All right, well, first off, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. I've been a huge fan of your games ever since I was a kid, and still go back and play them frequently. And kind of to that point, I've heard that with Omega 6 being done now, congratulations, by the way. It's kind of been a long time coming because it started as a manga, of course, but even before that, I've heard that you were showing it to Miyamoto during your first interview with Nintendo well over 30 years ago at this point. So I was curious how that went, and would you want to bring it back full circle and now show Miyamoto the finished product, what that early art ended up being?
Manga
so I sent him the French version of Omega 6, and he asked me for an autograph, which was fun. And I sent the game because the game's only just been released in Japan a couple of months ago. I sent the package, the physical version, to Nintendo, but I haven't heard back from them yet. Just going back to the origins of Omega 6 being the short story, the short comic that I took to the interview. It wasn't actually Omega 6, but it was the roots of the story, and the fact, in so much as it was a science fiction space adventure. But it wasn't finished either. So just from a personal note, even back then, I'd always dreamed of becoming a manga artist, comics artist. So 30 years plus on, finally being able to have something published and finish something, it's like a dream come true.
Congratulations. And I also did order the French version of it and tried to read it, so I'm looking forward to the English translation later. We were wondering, how different is the story in the game than the manga?
The story in the game is designed in terms of being a story for a game. So it's a lot simpler, and it's geared towards the game being fun. So there's it's also a little bit more comical in the comic itself. The characters and the setting, the world, etc. That it's set in. This is all the same, but I think if you think of them as two different things entirely, you wouldn't be wrong.
Okay. So having worked at Nintendo for as long as you did, over 30 years, I believe, is there any lesson you took away from your time there that you applied to Omega 6, or that you can look back at Nintendo and, as inspiration for the final game?
Probably the biggest lesson was how to create games in general that are easy to play, that you just basically plug in and play, you go. There's no confusion, there's no huge difficulty spikes, etc. It's just a smooth experience, and I think that's probably the biggest lesson I took from Nintendo.
And that kind of shows through your gameography, like, for instance, going back to, the original F-Zero, which you were, involved with as well. And that kind of brings me to another point. For years, people have been asking for a new F-Zero or a new Star Fox game, and we finally got a new F-Zero in the form of F-Zero 99. And I was curious, for one, what that was like for you, from your perspective, to see your artwork, I believe, being featured again in a modern title. And two, if you would, what else you would like to see from F-Zero, and if you had, championed doing more with the series while you were at Nintendo.
when I saw F-Zero 99, to be honest, the first thing I thought when I took a good look at it was, I really want to go back and redraw that stuff. This is pixel art that I drew when I was 23, 24 years old. So I've learned a bit since then. And it's kind of looking back is a bit awkward. Going on to if there was to be a new F-Zero or Star Fox, and what would I like to see? I think there's probably one of two ways it would go. One of which is there will be somebody, because when I built the worlds for F-Zero and Star Fox, when I came up with the characters in the worlds, my artistic bent came out. It's quite a personal, well, not personal work, but there's quite a bit of depth to those worlds. So there will have to be somebody at Nintendo who has a similar affinity for the previous works and the canon, etc., and takes it in that direction, or something like F-Zero 99, where it's reborn for a wider audience.
On those notes, kind of like the last games you worked at Nintendo came out in 2016. Do you think any of the projects you worked on after will ever see the light of day at some point? Kind of like how Star Fox 2 came out many decades later.
残念ながらないですね。
Unfortunately not.
All right, that's too bad. So it's well known that you helped create Tingle in Majora's Mask, but it's a little less clear, from my research at least, or rather, it seems like it's not entirely clear to everyone who created the main mask in Majora's Mask, being Majora's Mask, or the moon with the giant face on it. And I was curious. People have speculated it was in fact you. I was wondering if you could confirm if you were the one who designed both of those, and if you remember anything specific that is interesting about creating those.
全て僕が作りました。
The mask and the moon, that was all me. I can confirm that. And any interesting little stories. Probably the main thing to bear in mind is that the development period for Majora's Mask was very short, comparatively speaking, and it started off right after the Ocarina, the previous game, had been released. We didn't have much time, and it was going to come out relatively shortly after that previous game, so there was a need to change the look and the feel of the game considerably compared to the previous game. Hence the moon, the mask, and Chinkle.
Well, that's great. Like we love that terrifying face on the moon. I'll remember for all time. But kind of at Nintendo, it seems like you did wear many hats. So I was wondering, when you oversaw some projects such as F-Zero GX, were you also responsible for like gameplay as well as art at times?
With GX, that was, as you know, it was developed by Sega. So my position was I was more of a producer on the project, with oversight on the creative side of things. So whereas I wouldn't be designing the courses and the other things, I would be giving them advice on the character design, the course design, that kind of thing. Although prior to that, with the F-Zero series specifically, up until the Nintendo 64 F-Zero X, I think it was, I was designing some of the courses because the team was so small that a lot of us wore multiple hats, so I would be doing the art as well as designing some of the courses as well.
Given, again, how long you worked at Nintendo for, we were curious if you had a favorite memory from working at Nintendo, and what your favorite project to work on while you were there was.
やっぱり Star Fox.
I can answer that in one project, which is Star Fox 64. Because I had a hand in so many different things. Obviously, I was working on the arts side of things, character design, the actual graphics as well, but also the game design, the scenario, the story. I was working in tandem with the composer, like asking them for specific direction for the music, etc. It wasn't that it was just me making the game. Obviously, this is a team thing, but it's the game I feel that I had the biggest part in, the most influence on.
もちろんみんなに協力してもらってですけど。
Very cool. Well, that's one of my favorite games too.
And like we were wondering, what interests you most in gaming these days? And is there a non-Nintendo franchise that you admire or wished you could work on? That was one of our fan questions.
ですね、最近遊んでるゲームですか？キングダムカム
Deliverance? Kingdom Come Deliverance?
そう。
Yeah. Yeah, so the New Kingdom Come game, I haven't got very far on it because it takes a lot of time to get through it, but I really like the realistic worldview games. I think as a player, it's because it's something that I don't think I could make myself. So as a player, I'm enjoying just, rather than being from a creative point of view, I'm enjoying it purely as a player.
純粋にプレイヤーとして楽しめるのかなっていう気分がありま
I
す。
think, and if there was a chance to work on something, personally, I'd love to be, even if it was a small part of something like a AAA title, like Witcher 3 or Kingdom Come, that kind of stuff. I think it's probably because it comes out of curiosity. And if it was like an action game or a space shooting game or something, I can kind of imagine how it would come together as the process of production. But for a big AAA title, it's something I haven't experienced. So the curiosity of how these huge projects come together, I think that's why I feel like they.
Oh, interesting. Wouldn't expect that, but
まあなぜ、この答えは、やっぱ好奇心ですね。きっと全然作り方違うんだ。
I think my fans are probably expecting or hoping that I'd be coming out with a 3D space shooting game or a race game or something like that. But from a creator's point of view, I really want to do something new every time. Experiment with something new.
ファンの人たちはね、やっぱりこう、また 3D シューティングとかレース作ってほしいみたいなおっしゃるんですけども、まあ、作り手の気持ちとしては、知らない世界にどんどん飛び込みたいっていうの方が強いですね。
Thank you so much, and again, thank you so much for your time chatting with us. Been a huge fan for decades, and it's a pleasure to speak with you today.
yeah, arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you.
ありがとう
ありがとうございました。